Hi, everyone. Today I have a guest, Toni from Growblocks. Welcome, Toni.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yes, and again, it's not a surprise. We'll talk about revenue operations, RevOps. Maybe we could start by having a quick introduction. So, Toni, maybe you can talk about your background and also the company Growblocks that you work for.
Thanks, Mikko. Yes, so my background has been now in B2B SaaS for the last 10 or 11 years or something like that. I think the oddity is I started out a little bit more on the finance side and then very quickly got, let's just say, bored with that and then wanted to jump on the front side of the business, which then became revenue operations. And in all honesty, in all truth, so we actually didn't call it RevOps from day one. We call it commercial operations because we were like, revenue operations, that's never going to stick. It needs to be, and we were completely off with that. But really kind of starting this journey out pretty early on. And then over time, and I think this is where my story is a little bit different and maybe unique. Over time, I got more and more responsibilities. Hey, Toni, you need to take care of the SDR team, take care of the performance team, take care of, all of these things. And suddenly I ended up with a larger and larger team. And then it was kind of almost a logical step to then say for my CEO to put the CRO label on me. Basically in that step, then owning all marketing, all sales, all CS, all revenue operations. So I was CRO for Falcon, which is now Brandwatch for a while. We exited this one. This was awesome. Then after a year, moved on to a company called Planday, also here in the Nordics. And those guys, we exited also 18 months or so after I joined, actually. And since then, building Growblocks doing this now for a year and obviously kind of very much around revenue operations. But at the end of the day, really what we've been realizing while building those companies, my co-founders and I, is there's a lot of focus on, budgets and how they manage costs, but there's just, an equally large side missing, which is the focus on managing revenue. And that's what we're solving with an operating model. And, happy to talk more about all of that stuff, maybe later, maybe not. But that's my quick intro, Mikko. Thanks.
Excellent. I feel that in the US, there are lots of companies that have RevOps teams in place, and it's also definitely up and coming here in Europe. But you mentioned that you sort of started in RevOps already 10 years ago, even though it was a slightly different title. Like if you analyze that journey and what you have seen in other companies as well, like how has the journey been the past 10 years? Or companies now putting more attention on these topics, or how do you feel the development has been?
I think it's an evolution also within companies. And I think it's driven by obviously the complexity that you have in go-to-market, both from all the tools and all the data and the process and the complexity that, the customer journey doesn't stop at selling. That's, usually almost where it starts, right? So really then the first step is, hey, we need to hire someone to take care of HubSpot. That's usually the first step, or someone, some SDRs being promoted because, hey, this guy is like just great with CRM compliance and now he owns HubSpot. And then it evolves, right? Because what then happens is, first of all, I sometimes call it the CS and marketing FOMO or envy of, oh, I also want to have that analytical person. I also have tools. I also have data. I need someone like that. And that then usually happens. I call it the silo ops, right? You have those different ops people working for those silos. And this was then, our approach really early on was we looked at this and we're like, hey, all of these are kind of the same profiles. All of these are kind of working on the same problems. So they need to be under one umbrella, under one roof, right? So that's why we then made the jump from silo ops to revenue ops. So actually we call it commercial ops, but no one needs to know that. And then realized, hey, these things actually hang together. And I think then I think where the US folks are much further ahead than Europe. Sure, there is the realization that someone needs to manage tools and data and process. I think that's very clear. But once you have a small team of experts that understand your revenue engine end to end, that because simply they have to roll out tools, and when you roll out a tool, you will very quickly meet the reality of how things are happening in terms of tools and users and what they're doing and so forth. So you basically end up with a small team of experts that really fully understand your revenue engine. They fully understand how money is being made on the top end and how it's all funnels through and then is, on the churn and upsell side. And what those American companies have figured out to a large degree is, okay, so why am I only why am I using those experts for my own business only to roll out tools? I could do much more cool stuff with these folks. And then they start using them for more strategic items, right? And this is, where it goes maybe into revenue planning, where it goes into revenue execution, where suddenly, someone in RevOps is being asked, hey, so we want to triple next year. The CFO says we have that much CAC available, so customer acquisition cost. Is this even doable, right? And that question isn't being asked so often to RevOps folks in Europe, I feel, but those are actually the ones that can help you determine whether or not that's achievable or not, right? And I think this is where some of the American guys are, again, 1 or 2 steps ahead. And I think it's not going to take long for Europe to catch up with the same thing.
Yep. In the previous episode, we had Ryan Milligan from CodaPath, and he has a background in data and analytics. Then we also have some individuals joining as guests who have background in sales and doing nowadays RevOps. You mentioned that you have sort of background in finance.
Yeah.
Do you feel that is there one profile that really fits nicely into RevOps, or what do you see in terms of background of individuals who are now taking these roles?
Yeah. So I think so I don't have a perfect, hey, this is the distribution, 80-20, 50-50, whatever. But what I feel is that there's a kind of a nice 50-50 split of people with a very analytical background, if you will. And that might be the data analysts, that might be someone from finance, it might be management consultants, it might even be investment bankers, something like that, that go into the revenue operations role. And then you have an equal amount of people with a specific go-to-market background, right? And we covered the first example, which is the SDR, the AE that has the best, CRM compliance. Okay, now you're the sales ops person now. But equally so, I think you have it with especially marketing very technical. And if you're a junior person that is responsible stitching things together and using Zapier for all kinds of different things, right? That then ends up being the person suddenly being, marketing ops. And I think similar story for CS. So I think that's how those two profiles emerge on the RevOps role. And I think it's pretty great actually, because if you have a team, and really talking team here, not just one person RevOps, but if you have a team, both of the analytical background kind of people and the, hey, this is how stuff really happens in reality people, I think is a great mix actually to have, and a really strong team to build.
Yeah. And where do you put this RevOps in the organization? What are the best practices in terms of, if you have a RevOps leader, who is that person reporting to?
Yeah.
Is it CEO, Chief Revenue Officer, maybe CFO? What are the best practices you have seen?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit biased. Was a CRO twice, and in in both cases, RevOps reported directly to me, and I think that's how it should be. I think RevOps should roll into the person that owns revenue as a whole. Sometimes that's the CRO, and then we can discuss, well, is the CRO owning marketing or not, and all of these things. Sometimes when you don't have that layer of leadership in your organization, it's almost the CEO. And I think that sometimes is just a little bit impractical, because the CEO just doesn't have time for some of those RevOps topics, right? Which then leads to RevOps hanging under COO or CFO, which is great because it's neutral ground, right? It's not owned by, so the worst thing is to be owned by sales, CS, or marketing, by the way. That's the worst thing. I can really, hope no one is really doing that. And the neutral option between CFO and COO, the reason why I don't like that so much is you sometimes become a little bit more of a business partner, and I'm not sure if everyone has worked in like big organizations where there's this finance business partner coming in and then showing you some slides. That relationship to that person, while it's all great people, is never as close as you need to have those folks to you, as you need to with a RevOps team that really works well, right? So that's why I'm really, RevOps needs to sit as close as possible to revenue without being biased by one single function. That's probably how I would describe it the best.
Yeah. And do you feel RevOps needs like specific KPIs, or do you feel that the sort of the company KPIs and objectives are the ones that are also good for RevOps, because they obviously focus not only on new business or CS or marketing, but it's the whole revenue engine, as you said. But do you think they need specific KPIs, and do you typically see that RevOps people have like performance-based component in the salary model, for example?
Yeah, really interesting question. So I have recently woken up to the reality that a couple of RevOps folks actually have a commission component. I don't think I'm a big fan of that. I think I'm generally not a big fan of commissions or those performance-based bonuses in general. I think for sales it's just very difficult to not have it, so therefore you need to have it. For everything else, it's difficult, I feel. The only cases where it does make sense, and that includes everyone in the organization, if you will, and it's maybe specifically RevOps, is when it's about let's just say North Star metrics. So things that doesn't change all the time. I think it's really toxic to do RevOps bonuses and commissions on project deliveries and stuff like that. I think that's really terrible. But if you have RevOps being incentivized for the overall net new revenue number, for example, or for an overall CAC payback number, things would need to be figured out here to tune it in the right direction. But I think that would make sense, actually. And I think the way you can potentially de-stress it and avoid this, hey, we're being biased towards the end of the quarter, which you kind of want to have with sales. Maybe you do the period instead of quarterly, just annually, right? Are we hitting the annual revenue target? Yes or no? And then based on that, do some comp for revenue operations. I think that's fair. But at the end, so my big question at the end of the day is this driven because the organization doesn't value you as RevOps enough to pay you enough salary, or is it because you really think that more commission would make you work harder? And I usually think it's number one. It's not number two. I think this whole, I'm getting a commission now or bonus based on performance, I think that's going to wear off after 2 weeks, and then it's just then it's just forgotten. So that's why I'm highly skeptical of it.
Yep. Another thing that I've been thinking is there a connection between the rise of PLG, product-led growth, and the rise of RevOps? Because obviously if companies implement this PLG motion, they end up getting even more data. And I think it's sort of natural to link marketing ops and analyze traffic, and you start analyzing sales and conversion, and also the whole customer journey. Do you think that those two are linked? Because we have seen obviously a huge rise of PLG companies all over the world. Yes, I think
there's for sure a correlation. Is there a causation? Potentially. And I think so I've done this myself. I rolled out PLG at a Plan Day, actually. And doing this without a very strong RevOps leader and team behind it, impossible. Just the amount of stitching and wiring in the background you need to do, and the coordination with product, by the way. You can forget trying to do that either yourself or just with a sales ops person, by the way. So I think if you want to go down the PLG path and you're doing it, from a sales-led motion without a RevOps team behind it, I think you will fail. I don't even think you will struggle. I think you will fail, quite frankly. And I think in that sense, it's probably a good observation. I do think there are a couple of other trends and waves in the background, which really is this whole SaaS thing, right? The realization that sales doesn't stop at shipping the CD-ROM anymore. It's really just the start. And then again, right, this probably everyone saw this insane slide with the gazillion million of go-to-market logos. It's that is part of that as well, right? Someone needs to stitch this thing together, and it's not going to be a VP sales.
Good point. If I think of sales ops, and I know RevOps is more than sales ops, and sales ops is typically focusing on new business, but I've seen lots of very strong sales ops people who definitely have an impact, and they're respected in the organization. But then also I've seen sales ops individuals and teams that are seen as just a support function.
Yeah.
What are your tips for RevOps? Like, how can you actually make an impact so that people really respect you as a department and as an individual, even if they're like salespeople, CS people, and marketing people are not reporting to you? Like, how to actually make an impact?
Yeah, I think it's a number of different things actually. I think number one, the reason why sales ops, RevOps is being hired initially, yes, is because of data, tools, and processes. Period. I think why you will be respected in the long run has nothing to do with any of those three words. It has to do with you understanding the end-to-end engine, like in your head, and being able to use that to provide input to your revenue leaders or commercial leaders. That goes beyond what they fully understand themselves. And I can tell you, join any random C-level executive session and start talking about, hey, what if we tweak this thing in traffic? What if tweak this thing in outbound? What if the ACV or conversion rate goes up and down? And no one in that room will have any clue how this is really going to affect things. It's going to be the RevOps person in the room that can say, oh, wow, that would drive CAC up. Oh, wow, this would, result in this thing. If we do this, we need to kind of hire a bunch of other people over there. And that kind of thinking and that understanding, that will get you to the VP, by the way. Hey, we need to talk about tools all the time, and we need another seat for Salesforce, and can you please approve that? Or hey, this AE didn't fill in this field, and now we need to have a validation rule. That's not going to get you promoted and or respected by anyone down the line. By the way, you will remain to be the system admin person, as much as you potentially might hate that. But really, think about end-to-end, think about revenue impact, everything that your RevOps team is doing. There needs to be, it doesn't need to be a hard ROI, but there needs to be a, hey, this is why we're doing it for. And that sentence better end with more revenue or less cost. Otherwise, it's not going to be, you're just not going to be that useful for the organization.
And we have also lots of people in the audience who are building these go-to-market tools, and they've been selling services for and products for sales and marketing and CS. But I would imagine that with the rise of revenue ops, there's sort of like a new buying center also for these companies. They will actually sell to RevOps. Yes. And as you mentioned, the example that if you talk about those things in a big room, it's going to be the RevOps who actually gets it, and they start thinking how certain things impact KPIs and whatnot. So do you think the buying center will be more informed if you're selling to sales, marketing, and CS, for example, SaaS services? Now you'll end up negotiating and having meetings with RevOps, and most likely that's going to be quite well informed buying center. Do you think that has an impact on how to do sales? And obviously Growblocks is also providing great services for RevOps, so you have experience also from that side of the table.
No, absolutely. So I think RevOps, sales ops, anything ops has been part of the buying process for the last 10, 15 years already. So this is nothing new really. And they're usually there to give the technical thumbs up, And usually RevOps is really used to big numbers, like 100K, 200K for Salesforce. Yeah, that's just what it is. Let's negotiate a little bit down by 200,000 euros, no problem. What we found, selling to RevOps is them buying software for themselves. That is still a little bit of an underdeveloped area. There's still a I'm kind of used to big numbers, but I'm not too used to that I'm not buying it for someone else, but that I'm actually the decision maker. I'm the champion. I need to drive this into the organization versus I'm buying, let's just say, a prospecting tool. And that really helps the SDRs or BDRs, whatever you call them. And I'm giving my technical thumbs up to that, right? So I think if you are selling something to the go-to-market teams, I think revenue operations and similar will be part of your either champions or technical decision makers. If you're selling directly to them, then it's I think they're still early on that journey. That's my perspective.
Yeah, and there are lots of companies that have sales ops today, and sometimes sales ops is also focusing on CS and marketing and finance, but quite often they just focus on new business. So if you have that type of example, that the sales ops in place, they focus on new business only, do you think it's a better way to just expand the responsibilities of that sales ops function and start calling it RevOps so that they help CS, marketing, and finance as well? Or do you think it's better to first have CS ops and marketing ops, even though you end up having silo ops? Like what are your tips? Because there's so many companies that have sales ops, but it's mainly new business focused.
I think there's a big difference between sales ops that just one day decides that they're going to call themselves RevOps and actual RevOps. Then there's the, if you're sales ops and want to own more of the journey, which I understand, and then you should call yourself revenue operations. But you're still reporting to the VP sales. I think that's an issue. And then the other thing is, depending on the size of the organization, there, as I said, earlier, there is probably someone in marketing that kind of does the marketing ops job right now. And there's probably someone in CS that does the CS ops role right now. And that will be a little bit of a political maneuvering kind of situation where you basically now need to pull off a trick where you say like, hey, first of all, I don't like my boss anymore. I need to go somewhere else. I need to report to the next level up. Oh, and I'm going to take 2 of those folks with me that are reporting into other people. I think that's really difficult to pull off. I think you probably won't achieve that without C-level buy-in in this and, some tailwind and helping you. But that's, I think, what probably should be done, right? And I think maybe the step-by-step move would be to maybe, keep reporting to the VP sales, add CS ops. That's probably the easier one. Try and get marketing ops. And once you're, maybe 3-6 months out and have done that and people like you, then maybe say, hey, maybe it would be better to move out of the VP sales and report into someone more revenue or neutral. That's probably how, well, it's kind of how I approached it, honestly. That's how I did it in the end. But it's a tricky path. And I think by now, what makes it a little bit easier is it's not, by now it's a well-traveled path, right? You're not the first one trailblazing. There are a couple of examples you can use. And there might also be a decent chance that your CEO, COO, CFO, CRO, whatever, have seen this before and therefore might be more helpful and on that journey.
Yeah. And then also, of course, lots of startups in the audience as well. Some of them they don't have any ops yet. Yeah. Is it even possible to say like some sort of rule of thumb, like what's the head count or how many people in sales and CS and marketing do you typically have when it's the right time to start building ops team?
Yeah, I think there is actually, I think, so first of all, you need to be post product market fit. So you need to have a product that you can sell repeatedly, and you need to be on your journey to go to market fit, right? In ARR numbers, and those are wildly different all the time, but you're between 1 and 10 million ARR euros. That's where you would probably kind of be right now. And I think the earliest that I've seen is between 50 and 100 folks. Then you would start thinking about sales ops and or revenue operations. And usually you will end up doing sales ops earlier, around the 50 rather than the 100, because part of your initial motion might be outbound. And then the VP of sales says, well, we need to buy outreach now. And then the VP of sales sits there and tries to integrate outreach with HubSpot. And then he's like, actually, we need to hire someone for this. That will probably be the initial point here. And then you just go ahead and do that, right? I would even argue it's similar timing for having your first full finance hire around 50. It doesn't really make sense before. And that's probably when you get your first sales ops person. And then obviously you need to have an ambition to grow your sales team, and it can't just be founder-led sales. It needs to kind of move out of that and suddenly you have 5-10 reps for different reasons, or even CS folks or support folks. I think then ops is a good thing to have at that point. Yeah.
I really like the term you mentioned, go to market fit. So you mentioned first you need to find product market fit and then go to market fit. Is that a term that you have been using a lot? It's actually, I haven't been thinking about it that way, that product market fit first of course it makes sense, and then go to market fit so that you find your way of putting the product out in the market in a scalable way. But I like that idea, and that's, I guess, where RevOps comes into play.
Yeah. So I would like to claim that thought for myself, but I can't. Someone else came up with that, and I just, hey, that makes a bunch of sense. Let's copy this. Well, let's copy. Let's just use it, right? And I think the folks from Winning by Design are using this a lot. I think also the generally speaking, VCs are speaking that language, right? So if you think about it, if you're around 1 million and you have product market fit, that's where you get your Series A. And then from A to B is kind of you're between the 1 to 10 million. And the questions that they will ask you between the A and the B is, do you have repeatability in your sales process? And if the answer is yes, then it's like, well, let's do a massive Series B and just make sure that all of that money gets funneled through your repeatable sales process and then turns into revenue, right? That will be the conversation you have at that point, and that's once you have reached go-to-market fit.
Yeah. And then final question. Let's assume that there's an individual who will be the first RevOps person, and maybe it's a company between 5 to 15 million annual recurring revenue. They already have some tools in place. Maybe they use HubSpot for marketing automation, Salesforce for CRM, and then a bunch of other go-to-market tools. But how would you get started in that role? What would you do first? Because there's so many things. There's data, processes, people, technologies. Like, what would be the way to get started in that role if you're new to RevOps?
So it depends a little bit when you join. And maybe, if you're not number 51 on the headcount list, if you're a little bit later than that, around the 5 million, I think what will happen is that you will probably spend your first year, and I think that's also a good expectation to build with whoever is hiring you. You will probably spend your first year on cleanup work. You will open up HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever they're having, and you will like scratch your head and you're like, okay, I understand. That's where we are. And you will do the same thing with a couple of other things. What I would advise to do is think about, and you might have a bit of a tendency from your past. Maybe you're more of a marketing leaning or sales leaning or CS leaning person. Try and detach yourself as much as possible from that. I know it will give you some more quick wins early on and so forth. I get that, but really try and figure out what is the problem of the business right now, and focus your efforts on trying to help with that through your lens of tools, data, processes, and so forth. If the business is having, a massive churn problem, and you spend a year cleaning up, your lead types or whatever, I think it's, you will just not be valued as much in the organization. And I think that overall awareness, you need to have that around to make the right prioritization decisions. And then there's obviously a gazillion other pieces that might influence that. For example, the reason that you were hired initially, they might have like a specific thing for you. And I don't, it's difficult for you to say like, okay, I understand that. Yes, but I'm going to do something else now. So you probably need to do the stuff that someone wanted you to do originally.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the interview. So many good tips. If people now want to get in touch with you, maybe check the services Growblocks is providing, or just to spar all things RevOps with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So growblocks.com is one thing. Also, you can buy our product if you want to. That's also another thing.
Yeah. Well, just quickly, what is the product all about?
So really, what companies need to be using to manage their revenue is something that we're calling an operating model. And the operating model goes all the way from traffic to churn, everything in between. So it's not just sales, it's everything. And really what you want to understand is, instead of having kind of blended CVRs and blended everything, which finance is doing, and it's like leading to lots of headache, you want to be able to slice and dice it. You want to be able to have it fully connected to your full go-to-market stack. You want to use it for revenue planning. You want to use it for QBRs and MBRs. You want to make sure that, if the CFO comes and says, hey, we need to triple revenue next year and have 10 million of CAC, you want to be the person that can say, well, we can do that, but I need 1 million more, right? And that's what Growblocks is doing for most of the so for our customers, and most of them are B2B scale-ups actually, right? In SaaS. But how to stay in touch with me is connect with me on LinkedIn for sure. Also, I'm having also a podcast. Join that. It's called The Revenue Formula. Find it on Spotify and on my LinkedIn profile. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best way to keep hearing me ranting about revenue.
Excellent. Once more, thank you so much for the interview, and with all the others, we'll meet again next week with a new guest. Thanks, Toni, once more.
Wonderful. Thanks a bunch. Thanks for having me.